Eric Wong, welcome back to What's Possible.
It's great to be back.
Well, I am excited for our listeners to get to hear you yet again. Your episodes with me always are top ranking. People love hearing kind of words of wisdom from in the trenches. For those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of getting to know Eric, Eric does work for Adobe in that senior leader executive development space. I want to be super clear. These thoughts that Eric shares today are his and his alone. He is not here representing his organization. At the same time, Eric has had an incredible experience working with different organizations in addition to Adobe and brings to us a wealth of knowledge and experience. So I am grateful that we get to tap your brain, Eric, tap your experience, and share that with our listeners.
Thanks for the kind intro.
Of course. And so, Eric, this kind of came about, actually, I think it came about because I said, I want you back on the show. Let's talk about what's bubbling up in your mind. But then since I asked you that, you've had some pretty cool opportunities recently within your organization, and it's gotten your brain thinking. And one of the key things that we really want to dive into today, because so many of the people who were coaching over at Silicon Valley Change are navigating this. And so we have high performance leaders at, very senior levels who are trying to navigate in really high pressure, ever changing, kind of volatile, and most importantly, uncertain times. And so what do you do with that? And so that kind of got became our topic for today. We've moved around different topics and it's like, oh, both of us are facing this nonstop. So let's dive into that one. Before we do, just for the benefit of anyone who has not yet had the full pleasure of meeting you, can you just give them a sense of who you are behind the screen, behind your, title and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, I like to say at work, I like to work with high performing teams and high performing leaders. My official title is Principal in Org Effectiveness. And outside of work, I'm a dad, a husband, and I just got back from a great ski trip in Whistler. So feeling on a high from that.
Love it. All right. Well, I am glad we are capturing you with your body flooded with all that feel good chemicals. So we are going to have an awesome episode. Can you launch in why is this topic coming up for you? Why are you excited about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last year, we've really seen the pace of change accelerating. We saw the Super Bowl ads of, Chat GPT versus Anthropic, and everyone's questioning, okay, with AI happening, what's going on? And I'm not here to have a point of view on technology and where it's going, but I'm certainly working with leaders and teams that are trying to navigate what do you do when the future is more uncertain than ever. And I've had the opportunity just in the last few months just to work on some really cool modern leadership development for senior executives, but also working with some teams that have some really ambitious goals, in a very uncertain environment.
Yeah. If you can, anything that you're able to share, I would love to hear some of the insights from having you just came off of a really cool offsite retreat. What insights kind of bubbled up there for some of these top leaders?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, we asked them what kind of situation, how would you describe what type of leadership your situation you're in? And the two by far that were the most common, almost half of the group said that they felt like they were in a turnaround situation, and the other half felt like they were trying to build a startup in a bigger company. And what I thought was so funny about that is it's like these are people that, if you look at them, they're just leading high stakes initiatives, but internally it feels like I've got to turn this boat really fast, or I've got to build something in an environment that might not be used to something operating this quickly. And so the fact that that's what they're feeling is was really interesting to me.
Yeah. So, what do you do with that? You've got people feeling like this is a startup, this is a turnaround. And when you say those two things, what comes to me just from having worked with leaders in this and thinking about how they digest that, it's do or die. I've got to
Yeah.
perform at this level or I'm out. The intensity, the stress is really extreme. So what were some of the things that you either talked about there or even after you processed and thought about where these leaders are, what are some of your thoughts on what do you do with that?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things we had to figure out, going into that leadership retreat was what do we teach these days, right? And so
Yeah.
one person that I was really lucky to work with is Charles Kahn. So he wrote a book called The Imperfectionists. He's the chairman of Patagonia. He's now a biotech
Oh, wow.
investor, and one of the things that he did in this book was he asserts that traditional strategy is dead. So we learned about
Mm.
Porter's five forces in Stanford Business School when I was there 2 decades ago. And a lot of these techniques about like, may work for slow moving industries, but what do you do when things are moving so fast? And so one
Yeah.
of the things that they talk about is the power of being an imperfectionist, being curious, and being able to, like, one of the things they teach is having a dragonfly eye lens of the world, and a dragonfly has 3,000 little eyeballs. And so are you able to switch and see problems through different lenses? Because
Yeah.
so many leaders, have a very myopic lens. I'm an engineering leader, I'm an operations person, I'm a salesperson. And so, one of the things that makes leaders stand out and be able to operate in this is, can you kind of quickly switch the lens you're looking at the problem through? So you're looking at things, from a holistic point of view. The power of like, the it's not planning. It's almost like learning through doing. And
Yeah.
we've been talking about this for a while with design thinking and fail fast and everything, but it's scarier when you're responsible for a massive number. Like, we have to get to 100 million users. We have to get to $1 billion plus of revenue, and saying, you know what, our strategy is we're going to learn by doing. And the number of experiments that we can run and learn, that's how we're going to learn our way into this goal, which can be really scary when you're responsible for weekly, monthly reporting, when you
Yeah.
have to report up to the street on, and you're being evaluated on, being perfect at predicting a revenue growth number, and you have to be very imperfectionist in your path to get there.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me also think you also can't get too committed to your idea or your pathway because I think oftentimes we can get really excited about something and we want to see it through, but there has to be no attachment almost, I would imagine, in that model.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because, one thing that I think that teams have to accept is, even when you bring together a talented leadership team, the best ideas are not in the room.
Yeah.
And you have a group of people that are used to being the smartest people in the room, and more innovation is happening at the edges. It might be
Yeah.
happening out in Romania or India or on the front lines, because the competition now are, for a big company, feel like a million ankle biters, somebody vibe coding something in their garage. And
Yeah.
so it's not even like your traditional competitors are your main competition. How do you operate and move as fast as what might be, some random person that doesn't need to even know how to write code anymore might be able to code some app and eat away at your market share. So I think you have to have the humility to realize, like, how do you harness the collective intelligence that's out there, either on your own team or out there, and bring it in and operationalize it, using the strengths of your company.
Yeah. Well, it definitely requires letting go of ego, I would imagine, and and just saying, okay, let's bring uh, crowdsource, if you will, different thoughts, different ideas, and leverage whatever you have access to. But it also, going back to that imperfectionist, and I always, whenever I have a guest, I always kind of push on this that you know being able to fail fast, be able to pivot, don't be a perfectionist, all of that sounds great. It also requires an environment that is really safe. So we can tell people fail fast, we can tell people you don't need to be a perfectionist, and yet if the expectation is you better nail it on the first time because this is costing us millions or billions, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that, one of the things that I see is, it's a lot of it's down to leadership and role modeling, right? Is if the leaders, what they actually
Yeah.
reward at, through their actions, saying, oh, it's safe to fail, but them acknowledging I don't have all the answers, doing it themselves, I think is it matters a lot. Otherwise, no one's going to feel safe to kind of put their neck out there if that's the case. And then one thing that you and I talked about is like sometimes, especially now, your own success can be a total liability. Like we said, it's not
Yeah.
even like what got you here, like won't get you there. It's your own success is going to cloud your ability to realize that you could be wrong. Just questioning your assumptions that have led to your success is really important. And having years of success might be more of a liability than an advantage in this world where everything's changing fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, we can reflect. And it's funny with coaching, we'll often say when someone's stuck, well, let's talk about a previous success. So even as coaches, we need to really think twice about that because if we have them reflect on a previous success and what did you do that allowed you to be successful? What was your thinking process? What was your behavior? Whatever we're asking, it might not be as applicable. And we're constantly looking for, what are nuggets of right and good that we can leverage in the future. However, that might be changing also in the coaching context because we need fresh thinking. It makes me think of just a blank slate and just having a big fat eraser where you're erasing everything and saying, let's start from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to, I used to use this term a long time ago, but like, when you have success, it's like, streams will turn to rivers, will turn to deep gorges. And so for someone who's been successful, how do you break them out of these rivers of thinking
Yeah.
to imagine, sometimes very uncomfortable, situations so that you don't become the next, Blockbuster or, BlackBerry and that goes obsolete.
Right. No, definitely. Well, and it's funny, I'm going this weekend I'll be giving a bunch of talks. Well, over the course of a week, I'll be giving a bunch of talks. And the first one that I'll be giving is on navigating change. And that's my sweet spot, my passion. And when I think about it from kind of that neuroscience perspective and the pathways that we create, and we're asking people get off that pathway and and you're creating a new one. There is something, it puts the brain in a place of uncertainty, possibly fear, unfamiliar territory can make us feel like, no, I want to latch on to this because it's safety and it's survival. And so it does take time to kind of be able to create a new way of being, a new way of thinking. And yet we don't have that much time. We're being asked to do it at rapid speed. So I wonder if our brains will catch up with that.
Yeah, I mean, they have to, and you're seeing, yeah, you can spot it, like, I think it's gonna really sink people faster than ever before. Is like if you have a big ego, like you said, and you're not open to feedback or you're not open to
Mhm.
change, like very quickly, I think you can be left behind. So that neuroplasticity, that ability to continually evolve and
Yeah.
grow, I think is just absolutely critical.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to take just a moment and think of just let's go with one leader right now who you feel like they are killing it at this pace right now and they're keeping up with the times, they're ahead of it. As you think about that person, I want you to just share some of the qualities that you're seeing. What are they doing that's different than the people who are starting to fall behind?
Yeah, the overarching thing I'll say, and we talked about this leading up to this, is I'm seeing, and I don't think that I'm being overly biased as someone that does people stuff for a living. I'm really seeing the human the human characteristics, the EQ, the leadership, the storytelling really differentiate folks. One thing
Mhm.
that we talked about is having, like, people really want clarity, right?
Yeah.
So as a leader, your organization demands clarity. Like humans crave it. They want clarity. And so I think a
Yeah.
lot of that comes through, can you create a narrative that really helps people make sense of the current situation so that
Mhm.
everyone feels like they have clarity about what they need to do in order to support the mission? Um, I also think that there is a confidence and conviction that's
Mhm.
necessary. Like the best
Yeah.
leaders, I feel like, yeah, it's probably like a paradox between like, confidence and being open to, being proven wrong with the
Yeah.
data by everybody. And, I think we're in an intense work environment right now. And so, these leaders have to make sure that people know what's expected in the mission that we're on right now. A lot of teams, including at Adobe, are like on the battlefield right now. So you got to be out
Yeah.
there doing the work. It's intense, and so where I think the leaders that are really killing it are clear about that, but they're also offering this opportunity. Like you get the opportunity to build something game changing. We're at a pivotal point in our
Yeah.
industry right now. And I think the right people are excited, are drawn to the adventure, drawn to the opportunity. And then
Yeah.
if you've got a group of adventurers on your boat, then I think within that, if you've got the right people, then I think you can be kind and give a little bit of leeway. Like when, one leader said, like, hey, if anyone on this team says no, like you respect it, because we know that if you're saying no to something, you absolutely cannot handle it. You've got some family, some emergency. People say no, absolutely respect it. A leader said you have ultimate flexibility on this leadership team, but that was after he'd made the purpose and the norms clear. Within that, I think you can be incredibly kind and human in a very intense environment.
Yeah. Well, what I hear in that is it requires bravery, obviously, to be brave and, and bold and be able to kind of jump out of the plane and know that your parachute may or may not open, if you will. And
Yes.
then it requires as the leader, and then it requires very clearly articulating the mission to
Yes.
your team. And that clarity then links them to the why. And
Yep.
so it's an internal sense of confidence, sense of braveness, and then it's having that go outward to the team. And then also I
And
hear respect in there too, respecting your team
totally.
members' decisions.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And, they sometimes, the thought that's bubbling up for me right now is sometimes your financial metrics and goals and even your bullet point list of priorities are clear, but that's not enough. Like having a list and saying, this is our monthly average user, this is our revenue target, these are our 7 strategic initiatives. That's the least inspiring thing you could ever say. Put that slide up and just have the bullets. And so the leader above and beyond that, like creates a sense of purpose, like you said, sense of
Yeah.
mission, like here we're at right now. It's almost like we had as part of our retreat, we had a leader who was, we had a speaker who was a lead writer for Toy Story, for Ratatouille, who
Oh,
came from
wow.
Pixar. And like people really loved it because he talked about the power of storytelling. And I think that's that bravery, that hero's journey that you can
Yeah.
seduce people to be a part of. I think that's the magic of that leadership. And I think also in this time, it can be very easy for people to be scared. What does the lack of courage look like? It's hiding in the background. It's
Yeah.
not sticking your neck out there. It's just being a little bit of a coordinator versus a doer. And so, one leader, a product leader said, everyone here has a meaningful role. And that also means that there's no waste. If you're someone who wants to sit back and is waiting for leadership,
Mm.
then quickly you're going to be found out. And I'm not trying to say that in like a mean way, but when you're on a high performing team, like everyone's doing stuff. So the ratio of doing to administrative stuff has to be really high.
Yeah.
If you're a product team, like how much time are you spend coordinating versus actually shipping product? And at one team it's just like we got to change that ratio. We got to make that
Yeah.
ratio as high as possible. Just doing work. So if you have a brave group of people with a leader with conviction and confidence, then everyone feels like they're contributing to the overall mission.
Yeah, yeah. So if you were to identify, let's take that flip side of the coin, that, leaning back is not going to work in today's world. What other qualities do you, when you see certain qualities in some leaders and you're like, you're going to fall behind, or you're going to be, I was going to say shown the door. And I don't like that saying, but you're going to need a new opportunity in your future because you're not keeping up with the pace. What are some of those qualities that make you see
Yeah,
that?
I think when people get into creating drama, that
Mm,
is one signal.
yeah,
Playing either the victim or trying to vilify, trying to hide information, trying to play politics, weaponize access to power, access to information. I think that
yeah,
is a big screaming red flag. We already mentioned that, but I do think just people who like aren't willing to have a point of view,
Yeah.
and are sitting back, maybe stuck to the past, almost like the person, the guy that was the former high school quarterback who is now 20 years later still talking about the glory days. I think I see
Yeah.
that a little bit.
The
Um,
touchdown in 1983.
yeah, exactly. Just a lack of willingness to change and learn. I think that the willingness to have your mind changed and to like people who are diving in just to try to understand like what's going on. I think that curiosity is that lack of curiosity is also a big red flag.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just having this conversation about kind of the upcoming generations of workers, and I was saying they know no different than change. They have grown up in a world that you and I frankly didn't grow up in. And I know I'm older than you. So we, don't- I grew up in a very different world. But that aside, they are growing up with, first off, COVID, just a pandemic, and having to quickly be agile and up, school's closed, you're going home. This is what the world now looks like. And then, obviously the social media, everything has been fast paced. The AI came out, and all of a sudden I feel like we heard the words, artificial intelligence. And then the next day it was, that's what you use. That's what you do. It's chat GPT, it's gamma, it's perplexity, whatever your go-to is. And so they are used to being adaptable and agile in a way that I don't know that some of the older generations are. And I'm curious what your thoughts are around the kind of the upcoming workforce.
Yeah. I I have such like a positive view on all those things, like as the counterbalance to this younger generation, like they don't understand like hard work. They're like,
Mhm.
they're entitled, they expect to be able to work from home and all that type of stuff. But I think you're right. Like I think that they've grown up kind of AI native. Like, I
Yeah.
think like folks that grew up with the internet versus not growing up with the internet. And so think I'm I see a lot of great qualities in the next generation. I've two daughters as well, and my oldest daughter says she wants to be a YouTuber, right? And so, first reaction is like, no, that's like the worst decision ever. But I'm like, well, is that really any different than I want to be a movie star? When we were
Right.
growing up,
No.
because and creating a personal brand like and
Yeah.
creating videos, hopefully using Adobe products. Like maybe those are the skills of the future that you need to be able to create your own personal brand with companies or,
Yeah.
like job opportunities are not as clear and some of these on ramps aren't there. Like maybe that's a fantastic aspiration and she gets to practice creating like videos, not showing her face yet, hopefully, and not allowing strangers to talk to her. But there could be something in like, how do you create a brand and how do you like create videos and how do you get people to engage? And so, I'm saying that because I'm even fighting my own kind of visceral kind of negative
Yeah.
reaction to that. And they're I think that they have a lot of these great great new skill sets we can learn from.
Yeah, I would agree, and they're used to I think there's the upside and the downside of many things if you look at it from that lens. And so there's certainly the challenges with social media and all of that for this young generation. And then there's also something to be said, they'll post something, people don't like it, they're like, "Oh, whatever, I'll post again." Whereas
Yeah.
maybe older generations are like, "I'm never posting again." So
Yeah.
their resilience, they might be a little bit more sturdy in some ways. So I'm curious because so much of what we're talking about is it does require agility. It does require agency. It requires braveness. And I think those are some qualities that we're going to see in spades coming up the channel.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
optimistic.
Yeah. So let me ask you one final question around this before we wrap it up. You are a leader, let's say, of a team, and you are you're feeling like, how do I engage this team at the level they need to be? I'm bought in, I'm brave, I'm doing all these things. I am clearly, as you said, clearly identifying the why. I'm sharing the story to get the buy in. What else can you do to keep employees engaged in high pressure environments?
Yeah, I think what you're saying reminds me of situations where you are a strong leader, you've got a vision, you're like, "How do I get my team kind of bought in and operating at the
Yeah.
same pace and as excited as I am?" And, because it'll always feel like you're the most excited, the most dialed in, and I see this with leaders all the time, and I think it is a little bit of, slowing down to speed up, like, even if you like,
Mm,
the best leaders have a very strong sense of where they wanna go and, may in their minds have 51% of the vote, when it comes
mm,
to decisions, because like,
yeah.
decisions have to be made all the time, really quickly, but I think if you're able to get your team to feel like they're co-creating the vision together. I think, you can be anchored on the vision, but the how you get there and really getting people to point out like what could go really well, what could go really wrong. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think the thing you want to avoid is a feeling of, "Hey, somebody above me said this is a priority now, so go figure it out." I think that is the
Yeah.
most, like, demotivating
Mm,
thing when it's like, "This is our." This might look different at small companies, but at big companies, it might just be like, "Hey, like, we've decided that there is a, billion-dollar goal next year. We have to grow by 20%." And then you're like, okay, like, I don't feel resourced for it. Like, where did this
right.
come from?" And so I do think the storytelling in terms of giving the, context and narrative about why this is important, but also um, giving people the freedom, with to figure out like how are we going to do it, and being radically, radically, radically transparent. I think
Yeah.
transparency all the way. Like, there's no reason why stuff should stay, within just a leadership team. Obviously, there's some confidential stuff, but I just think like for companies they're almost trying to recreate experiences they had at startups where it's like every Friday might be a 30-minute stand-up meeting, and it's just like anything goes. It's just ask any questions,
Mm,
be totally transparent, and I'm seeing teams inside Adobe kind of institutionalize, hardwire more of these startup-like operational rhythms, and I think
mm.
like all around transparency and co-creation, and a bit of that feeling like we're gonna go change the world, and you can do that either at a smaller startup tech company or you can do that within a big company as well.
Yeah, that is the one thing that they say when you're navigating change, it's communicate, communicate, communicate. Even if you don't have new information,
Yep.
opening up that channel. So,
Yep. This is what we know. This
all
is what
right,
we don't know. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
This is where we are. But when there's silence, or to put it in current terms, when you feel ghosted at a company, it's not a very good feeling. So, Eric, as we wrap up, what do you hope is the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think you just have to get straight to the point, complete transparency, get doing the work. And I think for leaders, it is the clarity, the confidence, and the courage. I think
Yeah.
to dream big, and believe that you can get there while not knowing all the details of how you're going to get there. Your team's going to figure it out.
And one mindset switch that we need to embrace to survive in a fast paced, uncertain time.
I think just like the willingness to completely reinvent yourself versus
Yeah.
leaning on what either got you here or makes your ego feel good or makes you look good to your friends and people you want to impress.
And very last question. What is one thing that a leader can do right now in this moment to maybe create a positive shift?
Yeah, I think if you have a vision of where you want to go, set up a meeting with your team and saying, what are some headwinds and tailwinds, or just saying what's going well, what's not going well.
Yeah, love it. And for our listeners who feel like you could become bolder, more brave, and communicate even better, or maybe even feel like you need some help being a more influential leader, These are perfect coaching themes. I highly recommend reaching out and seeing what kind of support you can get to be the strongest leader possible, the most effective leader possible in this ever changing, fast paced, and uncertain world. I have a teeny bit of bonus content with Eric. I just asked him, what should we have talked about that we didn't? And there's one thing that Eric brought up that is essential. So, Eric, take it away.
There was a book a long time ago that Stephen M.R. Covey wrote called The Speed of Trust. And I remember uh, teaching leadership sessions at AT&T almost 20 years ago. And I'm seeing it play out in real life. Like you can have teams that have a strategy, operating model, roles and responsibilities, roadmap clarity. But if there is no underlying trust on the team,
Mm,
nothing else matters. It slows things down. It's like walking through mud. And I find that one of the fastest ways to building trust is a little bit of vulnerability and getting to know each other as real people. Oftentimes
yeah.
when you see the whole person, you're more willing to tolerate why this person is so unwilling to kind of quit or why they have such strong opinions. You have a bunch of achievers usually at this level, and spending a little bit of time building that empathy and trust, walking a little bit in each other's shoes, I think can go a long way and can be a meaningful investment if something just doesn't feel right on the team, even if you've got all the MBA checklist items taken care of.
Eric, thank you for staying on for just an extra minute to share because trust is everything. That is our foundation. So, once again, thank you for being on What's Possible.
Thanks. Always a pleasure.